said, that's Sam Ulano. So Sam had been touring. I didn't know that until when I started taking lessons later on in his life, a few years ago, that Sam used to do school tours. So when he asked for a volunteer, I raised my hand. I was like the first, as did all the other drummers that were there, and others. So he said, you, come up here. I recognize you from the World's Fair. And I went up on stage, and I did what Sam told me to do. And it was kind of frightening because there was about 1,200 people there, including faculty. And I was a smash hit. I was playing already for several years, and I really could play. I had bass bops down, and I had to play the drums. So I went from being this shy, unnoticeable kid to this like superstar in 30 minutes, where everyone wanted to start a band with me and play. Well, anyway, the next month, at the age of 15 years old, my drum instructor, my first drum instructor, Joe, opened up this big studio on a commercial strip in Bensonhurst, Dyker Heights area, and he hired me as the drum instructor, which is an awesome responsibility. And I had 20 students, and gained more as time went by. I was a very colorful character. I have to say that Sam Ulano saved my life. I lived in a middle-class, upper middle-class neighborhood, Italian neighborhood in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And although the neighborhood was good and the schools were good, the kids were bad. They were thugs. Some of them never lived to be 20, between the shootings, the drugs, the mob. A lot of trouble. There was a lot of trouble on the streets. But I stayed in my basement and I practiced hour after hour after hour. I wanted to be like Sam. I wanted to play the drums like Sam Ulano played the drums. And I had his books and I practiced and practiced and practiced. People would call and say, "You coming out?" And I said, "No, I'm practicing." Like while others were in the street getting into trouble, I was in the basement. My son, Dennis Jr., the best drummer I've ever, one of the best drummers I've ever heard. He's incredibly talented. Although I blew his mind last night, and I played 2 4-stroke roughs, single stroke, and I inverted them in 1 second. It went brr, brr. He says, "Dad, did you buzz that, or was that single stroke?" I said, "That was single stroke." So I guess the old man still has a little, still left in him. Now, during the mid-60s and mid-70s, I followed other drummers, mostly Ginger Baker. There was Mitch Mitchell, because I liked Jimi Hendrix, and Keith Moon, and John Bonham, and Clyde Bunker, to name some. However, I was married to the Sam Ulano method, and I practiced daily. I took no days off, no matter what group I was in or what kind of music I played. By the end of the day, I was in my basement playing my Sam Ulano studies. Sam was a historian. You want to talk about cut time? Alla Breva, he would tell you about the monks, where it started, the monasteries. You want to talk about the hi-hat, the sock symbol, he called it the low boy. He drew diagrams in your book of how it developed into what it is now. He explained to me, which I didn't know until I took lessons with him, that it was the bass drum pedal that has evolved us into the drum set as we know it now. Then you can talk to him about musicians, other great musicians. Most of them have already been mentioned by Glenn and Ron. Like Russ Moore, he would talk to me about him, and Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, Ralph C. Pace he knew very well and told me his stories, Rothman. Then there was Jim Chapin, who, I love this book, Jim Chapin, The Advanced Techniques of a Modern Drummer. I love the books, but I love this book. I always wondered if you had a second book, but anyway, he would always say, yeah, that was a good book, but it was full of mistakes, it's full of mistakes. I would always call him up and say, Jim, when are you going to fix those mistakes in that book of yours? But I enjoyed the book, and I talked to him about Simon Sternberg, and then, because I know you had a book, a series of conceived lessons in snare and bass drum, just something to that order. But it was all in cut time. One of the hardest books that I've ever read, and I still read it. It's one of the books that's on my table. I never put that away. I can still practice every day. Sam, what was it like to meet Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, Ed Shaughnessy? You could even mention to him a name of an obscure drummer. I remember one time I said, Sam, can you tell me about Mousy Alexander? Oh, he was a great drummer. That guy could play the drums. He was some drummer. Sam knew everyone. That was Sam. Sam was music. Sam was a businessman. He always told me, Dennis, music is business. And I knew that. And I knew it young. Sam, as we discussed, Sam, as Glenn pointed out, was a drumchiatrist. He had this HEF policy, H-E-F. Health, education, finance. Without health, Sam said, you had nothing. He used to work out with weights daily. Now, he was in his later part of life. He would say, punch me as hard as you can punch me. I would punch him. Harder than that. This guy's 90 years old. Harder than that. I said, okay. He used to work out. So he always made that a point, health. My nickname was Fatso. That's what he called me. Hey, Fatso, come on in. I weighed 265. I was plump. I lost 55 pounds since then. I lost the weight. And I would come in, I say, Sam, I lost 10 pounds. You need to lose more. Another 10 pounds. Finally, after 50 pounds, he says, well, now that's a good start. He got off my back with the weight for a while. Then he got into the education. And as I mentioned to you, he explained to me that music is a business. And I became skilled, and even at a young age. At 15, I had students at the studio, and I had my own students at my parents' house. And I would, people would say, how do you get to play the way you play, Dennis? How do you play like that? Even when I went to college, I wanted to see who the drummers were, who the musicians were, and I always had my drum pad in my book with my iron sticks. So after about 2 weeks, I got to see who was who. I took out my pad and I started to play. And everybody just looked at me and focused and said, wow, I never saw anyone play the drums like that. How do you play the drums like that? I said, well, my fee is $10 an hour, and I give lessons. And those who took lessons from me, I would teach them the same Ulano philosophy of teaching. Finances, back to his HEF. I had some credit card debt, and I mean, one of the first questions he asked me, he said, Dennis, do you have any debt? I said, well, I have a mortgage. Beside the mortgage, what kind of debt are you in? I have some credit cards. Tell me, how much money do you owe? And I would tell him, I owe this, that, the other thing. It would really drive him crazy. And it didn't stop until I started paying it down. So Sam really straightened me out in that regard. I just want to end by reminding everybody of this. I remember in baseball you had the Yogi-isms, Yogi Berra. So I had some Ulano-isms that I wrote down that I'm sure you've all heard of. Such thing as, you gotta count out loud, never stop for a mistake. You can only play as fast as your mind will allow. See where you are playing. Practice 2.5 hours a day. Now, there was 24 books in the series, and I wanted every book from cover to cover every day, 2.5 hours. I just thought that was kind of hard to do. Look at what you're reading. Don't take the written page for granted. And if you want to put that Ulanoism to use, just read bass bops. Just when you think you haven't figured out, he ended on the bass drum. On this line, he's going to start with the bass drum on the first line. On the next line, no. That's something that I learned. Never take the written page for granted. Listen to what you are playing. Listen to what you are reading. Practice gets good results. Practice does not make perfect. And once you did a book, you say, well, I finished this book, Sam. Oh yeah, you think you're finished with it. So you would take the book and then turn it upside down and say, all right, now let's do it again, this way. So you always turn the book upside down. Play musically, not mechanically. Think when you practice. And last but not least, your hands do not have brains. Your brains are in your head, not your hands. Thank you very, very much for doing this.